with the 9th pick, you can get a great player, but you just have to pick the right guy because more often than not, particularly nowadays, there aren't guys like you that played 4 years of college. The guys end up being traded and are journeymen and aren't particularly stars.
That does happen. There is an art and a science to drafting players, and the science to it is that there is no real science. You have to do your research and figure out if the guy that you're drafting is the right piece for what it is that you're trying to do. And a lot of times a guy's skill set may be applicable, but his personality or his work habits may not be. And so you have to take this into consideration, because it's one thing to draft talent, but it's another thing to develop that talent. And a lot of times you sometimes find diamonds in the rough, guys that don't necessarily jump off the board at you at the top of the lottery, but certainly guys that have the aptitude to be able to improve once they get into a setting. And you've got to be able to gauge how much improvement this guy is capable of.
Tony, I'm wondering, in your NBA career, you played on a lot of teams, you were around for a lot of years. Can you think of guys who were uber talented, drafted high, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason, and then maybe vice versa, the diamonds in the rough that were drafted late and then ended up becoming really good players?
I mean, again, I played with a lot of guys, and certainly I could throw some names out there. I don't really have one in particular that I can call right now, but I've been in that situation so many times. I mean, we've seen number 1 picks in the draft not pan out. We've seen guys that came from the second round that end up being all-stars. And again, you can get guys that are, even a guy like Donovan Mitchell last year, as good as people thought he was going to be, nobody knew that he was going to be as impactful at the NBA level as early as he was. So, again, you look at an organization like Utah, they've done a good job of drafting over the years, and they've gotten good players. You guys were talking about Rudy Gobert earlier and how far down he went, and look at the player that he turns out to be. So it's all about picking players. I always reference the team that drafted me out of college, the San Antonio Spurs, because I think they've done the best job probably of anybody in the league of taking guys that nobody's ever heard of from places that nobody's ever heard of and literally turning those guys into productive NBA players. And so I think there is a real art to that, and it's just sort of a feel of the guy and what he's going to be able to bring into your organization. That's having the foresight to see how the pieces fit what you're planning to do is really there really is a science.
So last night when the Pelicans get the number 1 pick, obviously the Zion would be the guy. I mean, unless they're going to trade that pick to another team for a superstar, but we would assume that they would take Zion. The lottery is just so crazy with these numbers. They had a 3%, 4% chance of getting the number 1 pick. Memphis didn't have a very good percentage of getting the 2. The 3 teams that had the best shot of getting the number 1 pick, 14%, get 3, 5, and 6.
Right.
And not to say that those players can't be, superstars, great players, but what was your reaction of just how the lottery worked out last night?
Honestly, I was a little disappointed. I'm a guy that I've never, really bought into the conspiracy theory about the lottery. I mean, I played for 15 years, so, maybe my opinion's a little bit biased, but I just never really bought into that. And but having said that, last night I was hoping to see, because I like to see the NBA do well. And the NBA does its best when there are relevant teams in New York and L.A. in particular, along with Chicago. The 2 biggest markets teams are the teams that are struggling right now. And it would have been nice to see the hoopla that would have went with seeing Zion go to New York, because the Knicks have struggled so much over the years. It would have been nice to see him potentially paired up with LeBron James in L.A. and maybe a resurgence there. But to see him picks 1 and 2 markets in the league, I guess really dispels the whole conspiracy rumor. Because trust me when I tell you, when Zion Williams ends up in New Orleans and John Morant ends up in Memphis, that's great for those organizations, but it's not what would be the best for the overall brand of promoting the NBA. So, but that's how you know things are done fair. It gives the teams now that are in the middle as good a chance as the teams on the bottom, and that should certainly alleviate the tank wars that we've seen over the years.
Yeah. Why do you think it's taken so long for the Wizards to announce a GM? Is it simply the fact that they're interested in people who work for the Final Four teams and they have to wait until those series are over?
I think they're doing a thorough search, and that could be part of it. But I think at this point, they had Ernie Grunfeld for a very long time, and so they want to make sure that they get this right. And in the process of getting it right, you're going to exhaust all your available options and maybe even take your time and wait out a few people, like you said, until the season ends to see who's actually a viable candidate. They may have their eyes on someone who's still active playoff-wise, so you're going to have to wait until, like I said, you've exhausted all options. I'm sure they have somebody designated, and then if they don't get that person, they probably have somebody designated after that. And so you have to wait for all of that to sort of play out.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to Tony Massenburg, Wizards studio analyst for NBC Sports Washington, has a book, Lessons from Lenny, they did with Walt Williams. What are the positives to take away from the Wizards season? Because the fan base beaten down, a lot of people weren't even following the Wizards at the end of the season. They lose John Wall. What are the positives, though, to take away moving forward?
There's plural positives?
I don't know. Getting Tony's take.
Well, let's just say this when you talk about the positives. When you've had a year like the Wizards had with the injuries and the trades and obviously just sort of retooling the roster in general over the course of the summer, the positives are that you don't know what the future brings. It could land you. You might be able to make some moves that you didn't foresee, and you're hoping that you get Bradley Beal back at a high level like he's been the last couple of years, and you hope that somebody looks at this team, prospective free agent, knowing that they don't have a lot of cap space, but maybe wants to come in and make a mark. A lot of times players find themselves in situations where everybody can't get to a playoff contender, and you just want to get into a city that's a good market city, which D.C. is, and you want to play with a good franchise player like Bradley Beal. And obviously John Wall is going to be coming back into the mix, but he's probably at least a year off. You won't see him next year, and so that gives – that means that there's opportunity for somebody here to be paired with Bradley Beal and be a significant part of what the Wizards are trying to do moving forward, if they're willing to make that move to D.C.